Welcome to the Life on Purpose podcast, conversations that explore holistic health, intentional living, learning, and growing. I'm your host, Brandy Eilert. All right, welcome back to the Life on Purpose podcast, where today my guest is Celine Thompson, registered dietitian nutritionist, integrative and functional medicine practitioner, founder of Fueling Fertility, and creator of the Restore Fertility Roadmap Program. So welcome, Celine. I'm so glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, that's a long list of credentials here. You do a lot of interesting work. So let's start. I really kind of want to know about you, what you do, and how you got there, because, like we were talking before we started recording, there's always a story behind why people do the work that they do. So why don't we just start with that?
Yeah, really for me, a career in dietetics is something that I chose in college. I didn't really even know that, you could get a degree really in dietetics. My family is from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Central Africa. And, like most parents, many of you probably out there could relate with me. It's, the doctors, engineers, nurses, like those degrees or career, where you can go into a line of work that's seen as, respectable, right? That people know really well, and they feel just more comfortable that you are going to be set as far as, making income and having a good life. So I started out as a pre-pharmacy major, actually, and then I did a lot of shadowing, and I just didn't really think that really resonated with me. I had always this interest in food and was just really interested. I don't even know really where that came from, of how you can use for like preventative medicine. So I really liked it. And, my dad was diagnosed with high blood pressure, like he was in his 30s. So like that was something that just really interested me of like how we can use food to kind of help his diagnosis of some of that. So that's kind of really where I got started with just nutrition in general.
That's really interesting. And I guess I find it really funny how we kind of have this innate knowing of how food can be used as medicine and with general health, but it's not really, like you said, kind of this like reputable area to go into. Were you able to help your dad with his health?
Yes, and and like any other family members, for a lot of health professionals out there, it's a little difficult, right? I mean, it's hard for the people in your home to accept and take your advice seriously. So I provide guidance, and I guide him through other health professionals who practice functional medicine that can help him. So yeah.
So let me ask you kind of a personal question. Are your parents still back in the Republic of Congo?
No, nope. So my parents are all here in the United States. Yep.
Okay.
We all moved here together. So,
I was just going to ask kind of the cultural difference of the way, medicine is seen here as opposed to there. Like, are there cultural differences as far as that goes?
I mean, like I said, the medicine, practice, it's really a respectable one, as far as like listening to your doctor and doing what your doctor says. There's a lot of that, especially for people who are born and raised in the city and don't really have a lot of more of like that traditional like practices that's getting passed on from like your grandparents. Like my parents didn't really have a whole lot of that growing up, so they're really just more exposed to like modern medicine and the practice there.
Yeah, it's something we've talked about on this show too, of just kind of the lack of passing down of this really helpful, useful information from our grandparents and our grandparents' parents and etc. There was kind of like this just stop break in that information being kind of passed down to us, to where it's no longer this norm of sharing of this knowledge. So I find that to be somewhat concerning, but hopefully people like you
Yes.
start that back up a little bit, like with our own families.
Yes. And, with that, the major thing that I could think of is just even like women's health issues, like even just when you get your first period, like the type of knowledge that's passed on to
Right.
you. Like, my mom tracked her cycles based on what she was taught. And I was actually, thinking about asking her before this interview if she could tell me who passed the knowledge down to her. And
Yeah.
I forgot to ask her, but that's something that she never talked to. Like, I have a sister, like she's never taught us how to
Yeah.
like track your cycles and the time that you get older, and as far as like preventing pregnancies and that kind of stuff, just that's something that she never passed on to us, and I don't know why.
Yeah, and that's not a unique story. My own mom has told me stories about, that was not something that was discussed in her household, and she had no idea what was happening to her when it happened. Because I mean, she was fairly young. She was 11 years old, same as me. And imagine not knowing what that means or what to do. And yeah, it just seems kind of unfair and maybe a little irresponsible not to. But
I know. Because she had four kids. She was
yeah.
never on hormonal birth control.
Yeah.
And when asked, she just said that she knew like how to chart your cycle, so when you're ovulating and all that stuff. And
Yes.
honestly, it never even rang a bell until I was just thinking about
Yeah.
like, oh, I just kind of this light bulb moment that I was like, what, my mom did this. Like, why didn't she ever like teach me how to do this?
Yeah. That's
So,
fascinating. So, I mean, let's go ahead and dive in. We're really diving into fertility today. I mean, that's the main topic that you and I had decided to discuss. How doing what you do kind of in nutrition, did you end up in kind of using natural medicine for fertility?
yes. So that's something like my own fertility story. Like I said, my mom didn't teach me how to track my cycle. So at some point, I know in college, and I think I must have just like told my primary care physician that, I was experiencing some acne or something, and
Mhm.
she recommended, birth control. And I, didn't really give me much information about it. And like I said, at that point, in my family, I don't know anybody that's ever been on birth control. So
Yeah.
that wasn't really something that was part of the culture I grew up in. But I was in college, and she said that this is something that's going to help. And I didn't really ask a whole lot of questions. I said, sure, let's try it. And I got on birth control, and it just, I don't know, it was like I was having this outer body experience where I'm
Mm.
just watching myself just be completely crazy. Like
I had the
hormonal birth
same
control,
experience. Yeah.
yes, just did not work for me.
Yeah.
And she did switch, a couple different ones where they did like just a progestin only. And it just didn't work. And someday I think I called the nurse and I said, I feel like there's this tingling down my leg. And she's like, well, maybe that could be a blood clot. So just stop taking it. And I just quit taking it,
Wow.
at
That's
that point.
terrifying.
Yeah. And and I just didn't think much about it and just kind of moved on. And and as time went on and I met my now husband, we were trying to conceive like after we got married. And for us, we were one of those people where we did conceive, like on our first try, and it was during our honeymoon, but then unfortunately miscarried around 7 weeks. And I remember just going to my doctor and asking if there was anything else like that we could be doing just to prepare both of our bodies for a healthy pregnancy, and if there is anything at all that we can do to try to reduce our risks
Yeah.
for this happening again. And that basically was just told that there's nothing to do, and at that point it was, a very stressful time. I like had just finished my master's degree and gotten married. So there was a lot of changes happening too in my life. And I was experiencing some gut issues. And, I was basically told, well, you figure out the gut issues and then maybe you can focus on, the trying to conceive. But nobody actually told me how, or like tell me that this was at all like connected, right, to
Yeah. Yeah.
fertility issues or like some of the symptoms I started to experience, which was symptoms of hormonal imbalance. And like I said, like I've never had any of those issues because I really never took birth control long term. So I didn't
Right.
really have anything to kind of compare it to, because I never had period issues.
Yeah. Yeah. So what were some of the gut issues that you were experiencing?
Yeah, so I just thought it was my gallbladder. So we did the HIDA scan. And I and they were like, okay, maybe it's an ulcer because my mom at some point has experienced that. So they said, well, maybe that could be family history. Let's do a scope and just to make sure that you don't have any ulcers.
Mhm.
They did an laparoscope and I didn't have any ulcers. And later on, actually through a broadcast from another dietitian, I listened to one of the dietitians was talking about just fertility and just your health in general and how all these body systems and everything is connected. And that was really fascinating to me. So I started looking into functional medicine, and we do have one that's about like 90 miles from where I live because we live in a small town. But they have like a 2-year long, wait list. So I did get my application in, and then they were able to get me in within 4 to 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So during that time, I started doing a lot of the research, and they ended up diagnosing me with SIBO. So that was one of mine. Yeah.
And SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Yes. Yeah.
So back to what you said before about it being kind of a 2-year long wait to see somebody in functional medicine, that only tells me that there is a need for more people in that practice.
Yes.
There are not enough. We have a doctor nearby in the town that I live who he came from emergency medicine and then is now an integrative medicine MD. And his weights are astronomical too. I mean, he's my practitioner and he's got people coming in from 5 different states. It's insane. Like there is a need for people that do what you do. There really is. So through your own healing process, kind of tell me how that was and what kind of made the connection for you to start working with people with fertility issues.
Yeah, I think the major thing was just really the lack of information and guidance about what to do, and just the standard practice of, we're not going to help you investigate, if there's anything that could be contributing to these miscarriages health wise until you've had 3. And then, based on age wise, saying like, well, you're younger than 35, because at that time I had just turned 30 years old.
Mhm.
And it was like, well, you got pregnant on that first try, and there's nothing that says that, this is going to happen again. So just go try, and really you have 12 months to go do that and then come back. That just didn't sit well with me. I just thought that was really unacceptable. And I said, that's a long time to be
Right.
trying and not given any guidance at all as far as like things I could be doing, or even like I said before, like how to track your cycle and identify when the fertile window is, other than, well, go try to have intercourse every other day. Like that's a lot, especially if it might take me 12 months to be able to do that. Like nobody wants to do that. At that point, it becomes like this
A
chore.
chore.
And
Right.
yeah, and that's a lot of days, right? To try to
Right.
like think about this and start living this life, because
Yeah.
it just takes over.
When really you could be using that energy to try to figure out what the problem is to begin with. What's the root cause of, this ability to maintain a pregnancy or to even become pregnant.
Yes.
So let's kind of define infertility, because you said something earlier that it wasn't really going to become it wasn't a problem to the practitioners until 3 pregnancy losses, and then after like 12 months. So is that what defines infertility?
Yeah, so really it's just you receive that diagnosis, or the definition of that is just that a person who's been actively, right, trying to conceive, having unprotected sex for 12 months if you are younger than 35, and then for 6 months if you are older than 35 or older.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. And so you have to experience kind of these losses and this huge weight before they'll even try to help you.
Yes, yeah. So, Yeah, and that's why I think I really like the functional medicine route where there's just some basic tests, right? Some annual visit tests that can actually give clues, and just using your menstrual cycle, if you're start tracking that to be able to know if you're having any issues before they can even give you a diagnosis.
Well, let's talk about that because people really like useful information. What are some basic kind of clues, tests that somebody who maybe is having a little bit of issues and doesn't want to wait for 3 pregnancy losses or 12 months can do right now?
Yeah, so like for women, and which is really most of the ones that I work with, and then we include the husbands or the partners. So really just starting even by just knowing your cycle, which would be from the first day of your period, like when you're bleeding, till the next one. So that would be the full menstrual cycle, like how long that is. Really, what's considered normal is 21 to 35 days. In functional medicine, sometimes we like to see that lower number more towards 24 to 26 days, just because the first half of your cycle is the follicular phase. That's when estrogen is dominant, and that's what is going to trigger the signal for the brain to release the LH or luteinizing hormone, for it to be able to trigger the release of the egg so that you can ovulate. And then after ovulation, you get your luteal phase. That's when progesterone is more dominant. And this is the phase where this is the only way really that we produce progesterone. So you have to ovulate. So if you're not ovulating, then you're not creating the progesterone, which is needed to sustain a pregnancy. So just knowing, like how long is your cycle? Does it fall into those normal? And when you ovulate, and if you are somebody who can identify when you ovulate, then you also have to and look how long is your luteal phase, because if it's too short, typically shorter than 10 to 11 days is kind of what we go by in practice, then that's not long enough to give that egg the time to implant to sustain your pregnancy.
So what are some clues that maybe somebody who's not looking for the clues to their ovulation that somebody should be looking for to kind of
Yes.
start?
So like if you are somebody who experience a lot of pain, right? And by pain, I mean like if you have to take pain relievers and like you can't get out of bed and do normal activities, like that is not normal, and sometimes I know I've had some clients that said that some providers have told them that, well, you're a woman and it's just if it's during your menstrual cycle or during your period or whatever, then you're fine, right? Like it's normal. No, pain is not normal. And mostly the pain can be indication for like inflammation going on because we release these prostaglandins during our periods. But if you're releasing too much, then that inflammation is something that we can work on with nutrition and lifestyle to try to decrease that so you experience less pain. And then, in extreme cases, that could be possibly a sign for endometriosis.
So how then does nutrition play a part? How then, if you're having some of these issues, these pain issues, this discomfort, your cycle is off, you're not able to get or sustain pregnancy, how then are you able to use kind of food and nutrition and that kind of healing to boost your fertility?
Yeah, so nutrition that's the foundation, right? It plays a big role into hormone production and also how our body is able to metabolize or break down the hormones that we're releasing through our bodies. So, we're talking about gut health comes in there. So it's very important because, estrogen and all of those things are broken down for whatever is not getting used by the body, and it needs to get out of the body for our body to be
No,
able
and
to
I think
function
that's
properly.
yeah. And I think that's something that's really trippy for people or confusing. Okay, why does my gut need to be in shape if I'm trying to have a baby? But it's because, all of this excess stuff needs to come out somehow, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and this was like that portion, right? That was kind
Mhm.
of the light bulb for me, because this is what I dealt with and struggled with because of my SIBO.
Yeah.
There's a, like in the gut, beta glucuronidase, which is an enzyme that can kind of like unpackage, all these toxins, like from like hormones that the body's trying to get rid of after the liver is done with the process of detoxification, and basically release that back into the bloodstream. So your gut has to be in shape. And if you're somebody who's struggling with like constipation, for instance, then you know you're not getting rid of those toxic chemicals as efficiently.
Absolutely. And that's extremely important to really deal with kind of that inflammation. And like you said, everything's connected. If you've got one system that's kind of not working properly, it can definitely trickle down into all these other systems that will then not work properly. So
Yes.
what are some symptoms for people to kind of look for, like SIBO, for instance? What were some symptoms for you, or something that maybe can be a light bulb for somebody who maybe can't get pregnant or stay pregnant, to be like, oh, well, maybe I should really dig into this area?
Yeah, so like that SIBO, just really a lot of inflammation in the gut, and then
Mhm.
you have what the trendy word, right, is leaky gut, but really that's just increased intestinal permeability. So like for me, I could not tolerate a lot of foods all of a sudden. I think I was down to like eating 10 foods
Yeah.
because that's all I could tolerate. Everything was making my body just feel like it was on fire. And my stomach would hurt like right after I was done eating, a lot of bloating,
Mhm.
um, you know, belching. At some point I thought I was being cool, like belching, but that's not normal, especially if you're doing that excessively after, every time, especially if after you drink even water, that could be like a sign of low stomach acid, which
Right.
is how our bodies prevent, you know, like some of the harmful
Viruses.
things,
Yeah.
yeah, from
Overgrowth.
entering.
Right.
Yes, yeah, so
Right.
that dysbiosis. And then, like I said, those digestive issues like diarrhea and constipation. So really, if you're not pooping every day, that's not okay.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit. This was something that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, especially when it comes to infertility, is the male partner's role in this. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yes, that's something that's just a little bit frustrating, right?
Yeah.
Because um, we are both putting in 50-50 for the DNA material for our future baby. So the male partner is very important. And there's actually some recent study, I think this one was published last year, where they're looking at the male's health and how that impacts things like risk of developing gestational diabetes in pregnancy,
Mm.
preeclampsia, and those are all going to impact your baby's health long term. So this is no longer the time to think that the male's part in pregnancy is to just fertilize the egg. So
Yes.
it goes way beyond that. So the stakes are really high now, in terms of thinking about that. But too often the guys are left, out of this equation, and most of the women I work with, they've been struggling for a while, and sometimes they don't even have a semen analysis done to test the male.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. So how then can people avoid um, maybe going the IVF route and kind of saving some time and money and actually being able to um, do this naturally? What are
Yeah,
some
and
steps, like when you're working with couples, what are the steps that you go through?
really, I just want to say, like, going through IVF or deciding to do that, that's a very personal decision,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
That was something that my husband and I just decided from the first go. Like, if I looked at all the stuff that the woman has to do, I said I could not do that. So, really, I am really in awe of the mamas out there who are powering through, right? All these
Yeah.
like needle injections and all of that. But with that said, there's actually a lot that you can do to increase your chances. And some people end up conceiving naturally and not even needing IVF. But for those who still need that, there's a way that you can still use nutrition and lifestyle to support the quality of both the egg and sperm, to be able to nourish those and hopefully increase the success of IVF. So the sperm and egg both kind of fully mature. That process takes about 90 days. So I usually encourage couples, if you can, to take that 3 to 4 months before, the egg retrieval, to go through nutrition and lifestyle changes to be able to boost the egg and sperm quality. So a lot of the things that we really work on is kind of like counteracting the effect of oxidative stress, which the main culprits with that is like poor diet choices and lifestyle, environmental exposures. And, we can't control some of those things, but there are things that we can do to reduce kind of the impact and the exposure. So that would be like cutting out plastic, and eliminating things like air fresheners and those plugins from the wall, fragrances, getting an air filter, like a filter for water, or like for indoor air quality, if you can afford those. But just like I said, some of the things like changing the personal care products, like those ones can be a very big ones.
Being that they're kind of major system disruptors.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So what does kind of the cleaning up of the diet look like? Is it different for every person? Is it different for every couple? How do you work with people and help them decide how to move forward in the nutrition department? Is there testing that needs to be done?
So, I mean, there are some general things, right, that we all have to do as far as just the overall healthy diet to support those body systems that do impact your reproductive health. So we're talking about anti-inflammatory foods, and those are going to be like your fruits, your vegetables, the fatty fish that's high in omega-3 fatty acids, nuts and seeds, the colorful, just basically eat the rainbow, right? For fruits and vegetables is kind of one of the things that I always say to make it easier for people to remember. So all those colors, those antioxidants are important.
What I find interesting is that it can be really simple. I mean, I think people kind of overcomplicate quote unquote diets and healthy eating, when really you should focus on anti-inflammatory whole foods.
Yes, yeah, whole foods.
Yeah, pretty cut and dry, and cut out the processed stuff and all of that. So let's talk about kind of some of your success stories.
Yeah. And, some of my success story, I just had a mama who delivered a baby, and she was kind of in the boat of miscarriages as well, and has had 2. And there's really not a lot of testing that they did. Or some people out there are the ones where they do your basic hormones, right? And they tell you everything is normal. So they don't really know why, right? You're doing all of this. So she kind of was in that boat, and she's one where they never did a semen analysis. I kept, asking for that, or saying how come you've been dealing with this for almost 2 years and you still haven't done that?
Right.
But she does have a healthy baby girl now. So that's really exciting. Yeah.
How big of a role does nutritional deficiencies play?
Yes. Yep. Oh, that's
that
a lot.
Seems to be a massive issue. That was one of my issues. I had some autoimmune issues that led to miscarriages and kind of these issues with getting and staying pregnant. And I ended up down the road, when I finally started digging in to other areas, having some major nutritional deficiencies. I wouldn't say it was a singular cause, but I did want to ask you about that and how that plays a part.
Yeah, and that's actually when you asked about testing earlier, that is something that I do test for nutritional. We do micronutrients, and then minerals are important, so we do replenish that. And especially for those who've been on birth control for so long. I mean, now that people are waiting, until like in their 30s to have children. Most women get on birth control like since they were 15 years old. So by the time you're 30, I mean, you've been on it for half your life.
Right.
And birth control does deplete some nutrient, especially your B vitamins, things, your minerals like magnesium.
Right.
Those are all very important. So selenium, which is a
Mhm.
powerful antioxidant, and that's also very good for thyroid health.
Mhm.
So yeah, so those, especially for women who are getting off of birth control, I typically really encourage them to get, like, if you're going to be getting a birth control, maybe give yourself like 6 months, right, to
Yeah.
try to work on replenishing some of those nutrients versus, like some of the recommendations of, oh, you can just get off birth control and start trying. Um,
Yeah, which I think, everybody thinks it's just kind of the magic. It's just going to magically happen. And sometimes it does. I mean, some women do not have any issues at all that are apparent.
yes.
And
Yep.
others very much struggle and it affects them massively.
Yeah.
So, and I know this maybe isn't kind of the area that, you deal with as kind of like a functional medicine practitioner, but what's the emotional toll like, and how is that piece kind of tended to in the healing process?
Oh, I mean, it's huge. I
Mhm.
mean, it can, and this is something that I'm able to relate to my clients, about, and I really encourage like seeking mental health counseling, just the emotional or even grieving. I just found there's a miscarriage doula that I recommend
Mhm.
my clients, seek counseling from, and support
Right.
if they just can't cope, because it is really difficult, because most of the time people don't know what to say. I mean, I remember, just when people say things like, oh, well, you were young, right? But you like
Yeah.
it's gonna happen, or you can just try again. Those are things that when you've lost your baby, it doesn't matter how long you
Yeah.
were pregnant. You're like, you don't care. That's not what you want to hear. And really, a friend of mine actually said something that stuck with me, and I kind of repeat that to people, is nobody tells a widow that you can just get married again. you know
Right.
S- so
Yeah.
why do people think that it's okay to tell a mother who's lost, her baby, and this life that the baby that she's never going to hold in her arms, that you
Yeah.
can just have another one doesn't replace this one
Right.
you know
Right. And I had the opposite problem is I wanted to discount my pain because it wasn't as bad as someone else's pain. So I found like my issue when we lost, our baby before the successful pregnancy that we had after finally,
Mhm.
was that, I had some friends who were close to me in my life who had lost their infant child. And I remember thinking,
Mhm.
well, I can't grieve the way that I didn't allow myself to grieve that way because it quote unquote, it wasn't as bad. And that person told me, he said, it doesn't matter. Loss is loss.
Mhm.
It's the loss of hope. You lost the hope of
Yes.
what this life was going to be like with this baby. I lost the hope of what my life was going to be like with my baby. And there's nothing different about that. And that stuck with me very much. So, in allowing these mothers to grieve the way that they need to grieve and feel the way they need to feel about it, I think is important too.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Yeah. So how, if somebody wants to work with you, get in touch with you, how can we find you?
I usually hang out on Instagram, and that's where it's pretty easy to find me. So
Okay.
I am at Fueling Fertility.
Okay, great. I will add that to the show notes, and everybody go over and check out Celine and the work she does. And was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I really would just like to say that there is hope, if you're out there struggling. Um, you don't have to struggle alone. There's so much you could be doing with your nutrition and lifestyle. And really the lifestyle is your stress level, your sleep, because our circadian rhythm is very much tied to our reproductive health. So I mean, you really want to work on that, getting like prioritizing sleep, and going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time, so you keep that internal clock. You know, and also sleeping like in the dark, right? Because, you know, shift, sometimes I've had women who had to either ask to be switched to day shifts because night shift workers
Oh.
tend to have
Mm.
more fertility issues. So if that's an option for you, that's something that you could see, if that can, you know, be given to you during this process and when you're
Yeah.
pregnant. Yeah, and some people just have quit their jobs, you know,
Right,
and
right.
find something else to try to
Mm.
help with that. But yeah, but really focusing on that, the nutrition and lifestyle, and don't leave your partner out of it.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, they're a major part, right? We tend to overlook
yes,
them, but yeah, they're
yeah,
half the
and it
process.
and it goes beyond the minute the pregnancy test turns positive. So we
Yeah.
know now that some of the things that you can experience in pregnancy, like that gestational diabetes, I mean, and that's not easy, right?
Right.
So, you know, the partner's health is important. And really, we're looking at this impacts not just you and your partner and your baby, but the future generation. Because if you're having a girl, that girl already has her eggs with her, so you're impacting that next generation as well.
100%. And even just kind of solidifying that foundation where you're doing this together, this healthy lifestyle and diet together, and then passing that on to the child that you are able to have. And then hopefully, you know, implementing into them that knowledge that they'll eventually pass down. I think that's an important piece, as well as to be able to kind of maintain the next generation's health. So
Yes.
maybe these major fertility issues, we can kind of see those levels start to go down a little bit, because they are very
Yeah,
concerning.
it is. And, you know, like a lot of the studies are looking at over the last, you know, decades or so. I mean, sperm count
Yeah.
is on the decline.
It's dwindling fast. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And actually, I have a guest coming on, two guests from you who we're going to talk about that exact thing, kind of the male side of things.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
so
Yes.
yeah, so we'll get to dive
Yeah.
into all of that, and the testosterone piece and the dwindling of all that and what men can do to kind of boost all of that. But Celine, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, and everybody go check her out. And like she said, if you're having issues with any kind of fertility, there's hope, and there are things that we can work on. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.